California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Hello everybody, I'm Huell, and here we are at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. We are standing here in front of their gold exhibit, and a fine exhibit it is too. We are not here by accident. This is no coincidence. We are here because this entire program, the subject of it, is going to be gold. When you think about California, you think about California's gold. And here, as kind of my co-host, my guest for this program is Dr. Kevin Starr, who is our state librarian. Dr. Starr, was I right that when you think about California, you think about gold?
Hugh, I think California is both the substance and the symbol of gold, and gold is the substance and symbol of California. After all, we're the Golden State. After all, it was the discovery of gold that brought some 300,000 young men and women into California and jump-started us into statehood. Otherwise, I think this remote Pacific province, recently acquired from Mexico, might have taken 50, 60 more years to develop to statehood. It might have been more like New Mexico and Arizona, which were only admitted to statehood in the early 1900s. You can't think of gold as the fact, or gold as the symbol, without thinking of California in a very powerful way. Let me just say that this idea of gold is a mysterious idea. It's a metal among many metals, and yet it has a certain talismanic, mysterious quality to it, doesn't it? A certain quality of enchantment, its ability to transform the world or to transform those who own it. And I think some of that has passed over to California. I think what we call the California dream, or the myth of California, is tied up with gold, the myth and dream of gold. This is the Golden State, the Golden Land, the place of golden opportunities, as the pioneers, the 49ers, found it, as we try and find it today.
Boy, I tell you, if that doesn't get you excited about gold, that sets the tone for what we're going to be doing in this program. And this first segment is a segment we did a couple of years ago up in Coloma. When people think of the discovery of gold, most people think of...
Well, they think of James Marshall.
1848, Sutter's Mill,
exactly.
The whole thing.
Exactly. In fact, there's a state park there now, and tourists come from all over the world to see where California, at least American California, began.
We're going to be visiting that site later on in the program, but first we're going to take a look at a little-known place, a little-known fact of gold and gold discovery here in California, because most of us don't realize that gold was first discovered not up in Sutter's Mill at Sutter's Creek, but here in Southern California. Let's take a look at that right now. And then when we come back, I'm sure you're going to have some editorial comments about what we see.
And maybe a few qualifications.
All right, let's take a look at it right now. For years, California history students have been taught that the state's first gold discovery was made in 1848 at Sutter's Mill in the foothills above Sacramento. In fact, this painting, loaned to us by the California Department of Parks and Recreation and entitled Marshall Discovering Gold, shows that exact moment in 1848 that changed life in California forever. But we had heard from reliable sources that actually gold was discovered in California years earlier and several hundred miles to the south. And in our never-ending quest for the truth, we headed out to find this place. Now, to get there, we went north from Los Angeles on the 5 freeway, then cut east on Highway 14 and took the Placerita Canyon exit. We were headed for Placerita Canyon Natural Area, owned by the state and operated by the Los Angeles County Department of Parks and Rec. Located near the town of Huell in the Santa Clarita Valley, this is a beautiful area. And as we quickly learned, it's also one of the most historic places in our entire state.
What happened here, it was March 9th, 1842, when Francisco Lopez was visiting his niece out here at the Rancho San Francisco, which takes up most of the Santa Clarita Valley. It was his 40th birthday, and he was going out to check on his cattle. He had cattle out here on the ranch, on his niece's ranch. So he came up the canyon here, and along about noon decided to take a siesta. So he settled down under the tree, had a little Indian servant with him named Juan, and Juan laid out a blanket, put a saddle down there, and he took a nap. After lunch, or after his siesta, he decided that he remembered what his wife had told him. His wife, Maria, had said, while you're out there, gather up some seasoning for our dinner tonight, because we're going to have a birthday party for you, right? So Francisco remembered that, and so he went over here. And actually, they say the Oak of the Golden Dream is where he found the gold, but he actually got up, walked over to this little grove right over here, and he saw these wild onions growing.
Now, I don't see any wild onions
I don't
today.
either. But he took out his sheath knife, began digging up these onions in here, and lo and behold, as he pulled them up, he saw little flakes of gold on the roots. And of course, he had an education in mineralogy. He knew what he was looking for, and he'd found it. So he starts digging up the hillside, and apparently the Indian servant thought he was nuts. But he jumps up and says, I found it, I found gold. He goes back to the ranch house and informs the assembled crowd there that he'd found gold. And so they decided maybe the best thing to do would be to take it down to Los Angeles. Juan Temple had the only safe south of the Tehachapi Mountains. So they decided that would be the best thing to do, put the gold in the safe there.
Well, now, wait a minute. How much gold did he find that afternoon?
That afternoon, he probably found maybe an ounce or maybe two.
Would it have been enough to, like, fill up his hand?
Oh, yeah, he would have had a nice little handful there that he'd gathered up in that afternoon.
So he took it down to Los Angeles.
Right.
Now, did the word spread? What happened?
Well, it's a kind of a strange thing because his niece, Donna Jacopa, was married to a guy named Captain Jose Salazar. Salazar was the head of a band of miners. They called them Gambesinos. And apparently Salazar immediately picked this up, and while everybody else went to town, he got his miners out here, and they started tearing up the creek looking for the gold. And most of it went into Salazar's pockets because in those days there wasn't the mining activity that we think of today. It was done in a rather, you might say, primitive way.
So wait a minute, why didn't this start the same kind of a gold rush that was started 6 years later up at Sutter's Creek?
That's a good question. Nobody really seems to know. It might have been the attitude of the Mexican government. At that time, there was a lot of people coming into California from other places, and they were deathly afraid of being overrun. I think the Mexican government did as much as possible to suppress this knowledge, although a sample was set by Abel Stearns off to the Mint in Washington, D.C., and they gave a very glowing report back to Stearns about it.
So this was good gold.
Oh, yeah, nothing wrong with it at all.
Was there a lot of it around here?
Well, Stearns says in his write-up on it that every year they took about 260 pounds of gold out of this canyon. And if you add that up, see, the gold rush was interrupted, you might say, in 1847 when the Mexican-American War broke out. And the miners, the Gambesinos in here, thought it'd be best to go back to Sonora, Mexico, where they came from. So they hightailed it back to Mexico. Very prudent, get out of the way of the war.
And then in 1848, all heck broke loose when they discovered gold up north from here.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's interesting that the gold was actually discovered. I thought you were going to say it was under this tree. That's kind of the famous tree where everybody thinks it was discovered. Right. But actually, the gold was discovered right here.
Right here.
In 1842 by Mr. Lopez, who was digging for wild onions.
Right, yeah.
Now, that is a little-known fact.
That's a little-known fact, very little known, yeah. Everybody, like I said, talks about the gold up north. As I mentioned, there was about 260 pounds of gold a year, according to Stearns, that came out of here. And if you add that up and use today's exchange, what is about $350 an ounce, we're talking $7,600,000 worth of gold.
Came out of Southern California.
Out of Southern California.
Right here.
Right here, yeah.
Is there any gold left?
Every so often, they go down the creek and do a little panning, although the county parks frowns on it because...
Did they pan for gold in the creek?
In the creek.
You have brought a little exhibit here as we finish up that shows the gold.
There's the gold.
Now that is the kind of, that's real gold?
That's real gold.
That isn't the gold he found.
Well, no, it wasn't personally in his hand, but it was, you know, from this area here.
So this is the kind of gold that he would have dug up out of the ground that day he was looking for wild onions.
Exactly, yes.
Wow. And there he is right there, Francisco Lopez.
Right.
A name that is not that well known.
No, and generally if he's mentioned at all, it'll be kind of a footnote someplace, and they'll say some itinerant herdsman may have found some gold. But it's very well documented how much he found and where he found it.
Well, John Marshall may be the name that everybody knows, but Francisco Lopez is the name of the guy who found it first.
He did it first.
And he found it right here under these trees, looking for wild onions on March the
9th, 1842.
1842, and there's the Oak of the Golden Dream, which has to be the most historic tree around, because if he hadn't been taking a nap under that tree, he never would have found the gold
exactly
over here.
Yeah. And if his wife hadn't nagged him a little bit to go find some spices for the evening meal, he might not even bother to walk over there.
So really, we should give credit to Mrs. Lopez.
Yes.
She's the one who is responsible for gold being discovered
Absolutely.
first.
She's the one, because if
California.
it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have been digging those onions up.
Thanks a lot. This
You're very welcome.
Great.
Thank you. Come back again.
What'd you think about that? How historically correct is that?
I think, Huell, the general substance of that is correct. But there's a number of unanswered questions. First of all, the story that he was accidentally looking for some onions, wild onions, and saw the gold, doesn't square with the fact that Francisco Lopez was an educated person. His parents had sent him to Mexico City, where he had graduated from the University of Mexico, or at least attended there. But more importantly, he had attended the College of Mineral Sciences in Mexico City and had been very interested in the possibilities of gold in or precious metals in Southern California. So the story seems to me a little suspicious. Plus, why a mere 2.5 weeks later were there some 50 Sonoran miners ready, willing, and able here in Southern California to go up to those placers and to work them? My gosh, the trip to Mexico was months across a trackless desert or months by sea.
So people were already looking for gold or thinking about the possibility of gold when Mr. Lopez found that gold in the onions.
I agree. Now, we have a saying in Los Angeles, don't quit your day job. And Mr. Lopez did not quit his day job. He was a cattleman, and he was the major domo of the rancho. At the same time, he was educated in mineralogy, and I think he had a suspicion. And I think when the full story, if it ever can fully be assembled, the full story will say that Mr. Lopez had a very educated supposition or suspicion that there was some gold, some placers in the Southern California region.
But he still could have found them in the onions. I mean, that's such a great story. And isn't that typical of the way history kind of gets very personalized?
The two could be true. It could be that he had a suspicion gold was there. It could be true that he picked up the onion and looked at it and saw it there. But the two stories coincide. They're not mutually contradictory.
And was there gold in Southern California?
There certainly was gold in Southern California. In fact, Don Abel Stearns here in Los Angeles was sending that gold around to the mint, to the Franklin Mint in Philadelphia, to be minted. The gold rush lasted 2, 3, 4 years. It began to yield, however, less and less, $5, $7 a day, down to $2 a day, and then towards the end, 25 cents a day. That's not worth the economic effort of the miners to work the placers.
So the gold in Southern California couldn't compare with the gold up north that was discovered a couple of years later.
But imagine, Huell, imagine if that placer had proved to go on and on and on throughout Southern California. The whole course of California history would have been reversed. The gold rush would have been out of Los Angeles and into Southern California rather than San Francisco.
But it wasn't. We cannot rewrite history. What we're going to do right now is look at this amazing film that we stumbled upon that was produced back in the late 40s by the commission that was set up to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the discovery of gold here in California. And it starred, among others, Governor Earl Warren.
You should have got an Academy Award for that performance.
Now, when our viewers watch this, it's kind of a campy old film from the 40s. It's one of those great boosterism films about the wonders, the greatness of California, which, of course, you and I still feel today, but if you put it on film today, people kind of laugh at it because it's so campy in a way, but it's wonderful to look at it.
They might admire Earl Warren's double-breasted suit.
Yeah, Earl Warren is great in this film. Do you have any idea how they got him to do this? Because he's actually acting in the beginning of the film. He has lines that he has to deliver.
Don't forget, Earl Warren was born in Bakersfield at a frontier time. His father was a railroadman. As a youngster, Earl Warren felt the California frontier. He graduated from the University of California. He loved California history. Even as governor, he was very interested in the history and the heritage of California. So I think it was a very easy sell for Earl Warren to do this. And at the same time, don't forget, in 1949, Earl Warren was in the process of directing a massive construction project throughout California of schools, highways, and other public facilities to take and to handle the millions of new Californians who were streaming in following World War II.
That's why this film talks about the wonder of our education system, the wonder of our electric system, of oil, of natural resources.
You're seeing a governor who, in his time, is taking California from a 9 million population and orienting it towards the fact that in 1962, a few years later, it would be the largest state in the Union.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this film now. It's about a 17-minute film produced back in the late 40s, starring, among others, Governor Earl Warren. It's the story of the discovery of gold by old James Marshall up at Sutter's Creek.
Yes?
The newspaper men you were expecting are here, Governor Warren.
Thank you. Tell them to come in.
How are you, Governor?
Happy
to see you again, sir.
Gentlemen, I'm happy to see you. Be seated, please.
Thank you. I know you're a busy man, Governor Warren, but I also know how you feel about California, and that's what we'd like to discuss.
As a native son, there's nothing I would rather talk about than California.
Our paper is going to publish a special edition celebrating the California Centennial. And as you, Governor Warren, signed the legislation for the appointment of the Centennial's Commission, we thought that it would emphasize the importance of this event if we had a statement from you.
I'll be happy to cooperate in any way I can.
In your opinion, Governor, what is the most important event in the history of California?
I would say the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill had as much bearing and direct influence on the shaping of California's history as any other one event. Look here. From its golden beginning, California's history has been both dramatic and exciting. Here it is, right about here. Yes, right at Coloma, where Marshall discovered gold on the 24th of January, 1848. For years, it's been the promised land to millions of people, and California has never broken faith. And, well, just ask any Californian.
A writer once said there are no words to describe a California sunset. You just have to see one.
And the waves go rest until they roll through the golden gate.
Even the blue Pacific stops when it reaches California.
Oh, that redwood tree up in the clouds got its roots in California.
This redwood tree was 50 years old when Noah built his ark. Man and Mother Nature joined hands in California and worked together.
When you see our mountains in the sky, Mother, you're in California.
Our Sierras are big and plenty rugged. See what I mean? They're taller than the Rockies. Yes, sir. There's no land in the world that can't be duplicated in California. It took 1 million years to make things ready. Everything was here but population.
Get me my Bible and my banjo. Get me a gun that won't rust.
But California was soon to have population. And plenty of it. People from all over the country were heading west. These people were farmers and blacksmiths, bakers and ranchers. These were pioneering Americans on their way to the promised land, to build their homes and till the soil. For as yet, gold had not been discovered, and Sacramento was called New Helvetia.
Turned and ready because I'm gonna get there first. Out of my way, you blasted Rockies. It's California. Or bust.
Today in Sacramento, Sutter's Fort stands as a monument to the memory of its founder, John A. Sutter, a man of big ideas. And through the years of the intervening century, it has been restored to be perpetually maintained. In this office, a little over 100 years ago, Sutter had summoned James Marshall, a millwright. As usual, Sutter had plans.
Morning, General.
Morning, Marshal.
What can I do for you?
I have an idea in mind that I'd like your opinion on. As you know, with the building project I've put into work, I've run into a lumber shortage. Now, how do you think we can cure this situation?
Well, one way would be to build your own sawmill.
That's right, Marshal. You show good sense. That's my idea precisely. Where do you think we ought to build it?
Can't think of a better spot than that property of yours at Coloma.
Yes, that would be good. Timber right along the river. Best transportation. When do you want to start?
Anytime you say, General.
I've always said there's no time like now.
I'll start for Coloma today.
For labor, you might use some of the Indians and a few of our men. And you better take Pete Wimmer and his family. Mrs. Wimmer makes a good camp cook.
I'll keep you posted on the mill's progress.
Fine. Good day, Marshal.
Good day, General. This mill race ain't deep enough to give the runoff we need for the mill. You gotta get it deeper.
You're the boss, Jim. We'll give her another foot or so.
Yeah, divert some of that river water through the race. It'll do most of the work for you.
We'll try it.
Get your shovels, boys.
A few days later, on January the 24th, Marshall again inspected the mill's progress.
Gold. Right here on the mill race. It's gold.
That don't look like gold to me.
Sure it is. I know gold when I see it, and this here ain't it. It's gold, all right. I know it's gold.
What Jim says is good enough for me. I'm going to do some looking for myself.
Well, if it is gold, I'm going to get on it, too.
Yeah, me too. Come on, go. Hey! Have that boy of yours saddle up my horse. I'm going to Sutter's Fort.
What is it, Marshal? What's wrong?
Come over here, General. What I got to say to you is for you alone. Look at that. I found gold.
Where did you get this?
At Coloma, right in the center of the mill race, and there's plenty of it.
Have you tested it yet?
No, I haven't got a doubt in my mind.
Give me those scales. We'll weigh it.
Is it? You believe it? Is it gold?
It appears to be. Get me the bottle marked fuller and the porcelain bowl out of the cabinet. Yes. Gold may also be tested by the use of aqua fortis. Reacts as it should. It's gold.
Gold. Gold, we're rich. We're rich!
This must remain a secret between the two of us.
Yeah, we won't tell anybody.
We'll go up to Coloma in the morning.
No, not me. I'm going tonight.
Then and there, Sutter had an odd premonition that somehow this discovery of gold, to him, meant disaster.
There are two things we've got to do, men. We've got to keep this discovery a secret, and we've got to finish the mill.
Who wants to work when there's gold waiting to be picked up?
Now, wait a minute, Wimmer. Let's be practical about this. I tell you what, men. In a few weeks, the mill can be finished. And if you'll agree to do it, you can all prospect on Sundays and keep whatever you find.
That's good.
I can't help feeling that if this secret leaked out, we might be ruined.
Nothing to worry about, General. Even if it is, there'll be enough gold for everybody.
There never has been, there never will be enough gold.
The chief of the Coloma tribe is here, General.
Good. I want at least 10 leagues of your land, Chief. It's land that surrounds my sawmill at Coloma.
You trade goods?
Plenty of everything you want. All this and all this is yours.
Hey, I know.
Oh, you too.
Well, that's fine. Now, if you'll just make your mark. Here. Send in Charlie Bennett.
Yes.
All right, Chief? I'll have all this stuff carted down to your camp. Bennett, I want you to ride down to Monterey and have Colonel Mason, the commanding officer, validate this lease.
Yes, sir.
I'm sending you, Bennett, because you worked at the mill, and you're in on the secret. Make sure you don't spill it.
I'd sooner spill my blood, sir. The reason I left Wales and took ship to California was to get away from coal and filthy pits.
I heard talk they're paying as high as $1 a day per man.
Well, Charlie Bennett, what brings you to Benicia?
On business for General Sutter.
Did you say Sutter?
Yeah.
I have another.
Oh, thanks.
$1 a day for digging coal. That's real money.
There's plenty of money in the digging of coal.
There's more money in the digging of gold. Gold? What do you know about mining gold? Oh, nothing. Forget it. Gold. Did you hear what he said? Gold. Business for General Sutter.
Where you going, Harry?
Maybe to Sutter's Fort. Maybe.
We'll all go together. Sarah, I'll be gone for a while.
I'm busy, Ezra. What is it?
Well, there's some trouble down at Sam Brandon's store.
What's the matter?
Well, Jake Whitmer, the teamster's trying to pay for some stuff with a gold nugget.
Gold nugget. Where'd he get it? He claims that one of the Wimmer kids told him they found gold up at the mill. Old Jake didn't believe it, but Mrs. Wimmer gave him some to prove it.
Well, what am I supposed to do about that?
Well, nobody down at the store believed it's gold, so Jake said to call you and you'd prove it.
It was no longer a premonition. Sutter now knew that his dreams of empire were collapsing. Sutter's secret from the very beginning was impossible to keep.
Gold! Gold! They found gold at Sutter's mill!
Up and down the coast and eastward across the plains, the news traveled.
Haven't you heard? They found gold in California!
It was like an epidemic of fever. Each man that heard the magic word, gold, was contaminated. The rush was on. Someone once said, when gold is found, God is lost. Everything dear to their hearts was thrown to the wind. But the discovery did help our country. Later in the nation's capital, it was conceded that California's gold helped strengthen our government during the critical period of the Civil War. Marshall's discovery also accelerated the building of the first transcontinental railroad. Its bands of steel binding our nation in closer unity. The last spike to be driven was made of California gold. But eventually it was found that the true wealth of California was in the energies and productivity of its people, the education of its children, and the fertility of its soil. Cattle ranches with fine-blooded stock, citrus orchards, whose bountiful harvests are shipped to all corners of the earth, vineyards, whose wines have become world famous, enough grain to feed all of California, and then some. Power, irrigation, California's got it. And another kind of gold was found, black gold. And today, over the width and breadth of the state, are the visible results of 100 years of effort and tenacity of purpose. But the most important wealth we possess is still growing. And California has some of the finest public schools in the world, and great universities for the education of its citizens. And finally, let us not forget that California's golden beginning and the great events which followed had their inception within this small but picturesque Coloma Valley. And here, overlooking the exact spot where he picked up the particles of gold which started the historic rush of Argonauts, California has erected in grateful tribute this imposing monument, under which rest the remains of James W. Marshall.
Boy, I'm excited. I'm fired up about California after seeing that. And we told you that Governor Warren, do you think he got paid for that?
No, I don't think so. State officials do not take honoraria for public appearances.
And he never really got probably any movie contracts out of that either.
No, but I think he conveyed to people the sense, to us today certainly, of how excited they were 50 years ago as California turned 100.
Yeah, well, we were excited to see that. We kind of found it on a dusty old vault. It has not been in wide distribution.
No.
It's not been shown in many movie theaters here lately.
And no great careers in acting were made from that film.
No, but the message was good. Now, continuing our gold theme, we're here with Anthony Kampf, who is the curator of the gem and mineral collection and of the gold collection here at the museum. Tell us what we've got here, Tony.
Well, actually, this, as far as we know, is the largest public exhibit of natural gold, perhaps in the world.
Really? So what we're looking at here is all real gold.
over 300 pounds of real gold.
And most of it California gold.
That's right.
Now, what's the story on this gold here?
Well, these are all nuggets from the same mine, the Ruby Drift mine up in Sierra County. These were all found back in the 1940s. And the interesting thing about a drift mine is that you're mining underground for nuggets, which of course are formed in rivers.
Mm-hmm.
But these are buried rivers. These are buried river gravels that were formed in the tertiary period, which is somewhere between 7 and 70 million years ago.
Really? So this is old California's gold.
Yes, this is old.
And I guess the question most of us immediately think of is, how in the heck do you ever get somebody who finds something like this to give it to the museum?
Well, actually, these don't belong to the museum.
They're on loan.
These are on loan. These actually belong to the county of Sierra, and they were given to the county by the family of the fellow who mined them.
So if Sierra County, if Sierra County undergoes a fiscal crisis, they could call these back and cash them in.
Huell, isn't it amazing that this gold was discovered in the 1940s? That's only 50 years ago. That's 100 years after the gold rush. Truly, there's still gold in them thar hills.
Yeah, so these were just found 60 years ago.
That's right. Well, gold is being found today.
Yeah.
As you well know.
All right, now back here, this is one you can't miss, right over your shoulder here. This is an actual piece of gold called the Mojave Nugget. Now, what's the story on that?
Well, it weighs 156 troy ounces, and to our knowledge, it is the largest California gold nugget in, well, I say captivity. I have to say what I mean by that, because obviously it's not a wild animal that you're going to go out and capture. But there are certainly many larger gold nuggets that have been melted down, found and melted down through the years, and there are certainly larger ones that are still in the ground. But this still exists in our hands, and it's the largest from California.
Exactly the way they found it.
Exactly the way they found it.
And look at this, Dr. Starr. It was found in Kern County.
Marvelous.
So that's Southern California.
That's right.
Yes, and very recently, too. This was found in the late 1970s.
Oh, my goodness.
And the story behind it is similarly intriguing. The story is that it was found by a fellow with a metal detector who actually had a metal detector attached to his Jeep. And he was combing this old gold district, the Stringer district, and actually found other nuggets, but this is by far the largest one that he found.
Now, how did you get that one?
This, again, you've picked another one that's on loan to us. This is on loan to us from Robert Peterson, who founded the Peterson Publishing Company.
So he bought it from the guy who originally found it?
Actually, he bought it from a dealer who bought it from the fellow who originally found it. These things get passed on through a number of hands through the years often.
Look at Huell, the shape of it. It has almost a human heart-like quality to it. It's a very dramatic shape.
Well, I guarantee you, if you stumbled across something like that, your heart would be beating. Your heart would be beating fast.
Imagine.
That is amazing. And of course, all this does is just gives encouragement to all those people out there with metal detectors to keep looking, because.
But imagine the excitement that was felt by a 49er in 1849, 1850, coming around the Horn, vesting everything. 1 out of 10 people would lose their lives coming here. And if suddenly something like this, or even smaller, what a dramatic moment to say, Eureka, I have found it.
And that guy up in Kern County, knowing him, he probably said a little bit more than Eureka when he found it. Now, this works in perfectly to our next segment, a California's Gold segment that we shot up in Coloma a couple of years ago about another famous nugget it's actually not that well known, but it is famous in history circles. Let's take a look at that segment right now and then come back for a comment on this gold nugget that we're going to see right now. Now, this is going to be interesting because I'm standing here with old James Marshall himself. This is his friend, Peter Wimmer, who at the time, back in 1848, was supervising all the Indians who were working here at Sutter's Mill. And James, it was January 1848, you and your friend Peter Wimmer were walking down here in the tailings of the mill. You saw something glistening in the sun. you leaned over and picked it up, and what did you think?
I didn't know what to think, except I thought it was gold because I had some schooling of geology back in 5th grade private education in New Jersey. So I knew that if gold would be really gold, it would be soft and malleable. So I knelt down and I put it on a flat rock and I pounded it with another round rock, and it sort of shattered like the shape of a regular shaped coin. I was convinced it was gold. So I went over to where the boys were having breakfast, and I asked Peter and the Mormons if they'd seen something like that. Well, one of them had a $5 gold piece he took out of his pocket and compared the taste and the texture, and he was convinced it was gold. Another one put it on an anvil, and he pounded it down, and he pretty much did the same test I'd done on the river. You know, he pounded it down, it didn't shatter like sulfur to copper. Instead, it just flattened.
So you ran 3 or 4 tests on it right away.
Exactly.
Now let's show that this is kind of about the size of what you found. What was
about
it?
Half the size of a pea.
About half the size of a pea. But your ultimate test, and this is where this interesting bit of history comes in, a little known part of history, the definitive test that you had made to decide whether you had really found gold or not, let's walk over here, took place right over here in this cabin. Now, tell us who we're getting ready to meet, James.
Wimmer, have you seen something that looked like this before? I heard you worked in the George fields in Georgia, in the gold fields in Georgia.
Well, I did. When we were running our boarding house, I went out and prospected in the gold fields, and this kind of looks like gold. So I know that if you put it in the lye pot, when you're making lye soap, it will disintegrate if it's not gold, and I just happen to be making soap today. So I'll put it in the lye pot, and we'll see what happens.
Now, wait a minute. Don't put it in yet. We hadn't gotten up to that point yet, because the whole idea is that this is Mrs. Wimmer. You're Peter's wife. These are your 2 children. You came with him up here when he was supervising the mill.
Right.
You're the only woman in camp, right?
I'm the only woman in camp. I'm here because they needed someone to cook, and I was married to Peter, so we came as a family, and I'm doing the cooking.
Okay, and because you were from Georgia and you had seen gold in Georgia, you're the only person here who really knows what raw gold looks like.
Raw gold. I've seen raw gold in the gold fields of Georgia. Our family went out and prospected, and we collected gold in Georgia.
So when James Marshall came over and handed you this little speck of gold, what he thought was gold, here we're going to reenact it here. This is living history going berserk here. We've got a kettle going. We don't have lye because this is a state historic park now.
Right.
We don't want lye boiling.
Lye is really caustic.
Yeah.
I have a stick that you would stir your lye soap with the stick. You wouldn't.
And what did you do? Just throw it in? Let's throw it in.
Throw it in.
She threw it in, and she...
Gold will sink to the bottom. You stir it around. Now the next step is to, when the lye soap is ready, you pour it into a form. It makes a brick. After Jenny made the brick of lye soap, the next day they were busy making breakfast, and one of the men said, "What about that piece of stuff we found? Is it still in the soap?" So they had to take the soap out of the form, and they started cutting it apart, looking for the piece of gold.
And at some point, they found it inside the piece of lye soap that you had made.
Right.
And what did you tell the men at that point?
I believe it's gold.
It had changed a brighter hue, but it didn't destroy it like we would have suspected had it not been gold. So I figured my partner John had to know about this. So then I put it in my bandana and I rode off for New Helvetia to show John to make some more tests.
So
conclusive tests.
Let's recreate that exact moment. Come on in here, fellas. These are the guys that Mrs. Wimmer would have been cooking for. That's a motley looking crew of workers over here.
Well, they'd had a hard life before they got here. Most of them had walked west to fight in the war, so they were a kind of a motley looking crew when they got here. They didn't have their women with them, so they weren't keeping them in line either.
All right, let's recreate that exact moment. And fellas, we want a sufficient amount of enthusiasm when she announces that this is in fact gold that she's got in the middle of her lye soap here. What was it you said, Jenny, to everyone who was assembled?
I believe we found gold, and this piece in the soap is gold.
We found gold.
Yeah, gold. There must be more around here if we found some.
Okay, we found gold, and here come the Wimmers. And boy, they just keep on coming, too. Now, in the spirit of recreating history, what we have done is invited the descendants of Jenny and Peter Wimmer to come back to the place where all of this happened in Coloma. And who is the spokesperson for this family here? Come on out here. These are all Wimmers?
Yes, Wimmers, and are there a few husbands stuck and wives here too?
Okay,
and
well that's okay. They married into the Wimmer family.
They did.
And how aware is the Wimmer family of the role that Jenny played in the discovery of gold here in California?
We're all very aware of Jenny's historical significance. Yes, we are.
Okay, and the story is that she boiled it down in that lye soap. Is that the story that you all tell?
Yes.
Are there other stories that are going around?
About the first nugget?
Yeah.
Oh, lots of stories.
Uh-huh.
And there are lots of people telling the story of the first nugget.
Uh-huh.
But the one that we saw today, the one that's up at Bancroft called the Wimmer nugget, is the one she wore in a little leather pouch around her neck for years. And Marshall gave that to her.
Okay, you gave that away. That was going to be our big secret. Come on in here. Here's the guy. You are the director of the Bancroft.
I am.
At UC Berkeley.
That's right.
And here is your security guy from the police department at UC Berkeley with his black satchel. And you've come all the way over here from Berkeley today.
That's right.
And in that black satchel, you brought, and let's put this out here because this is amazing. Tell us what we have here.
What we have here is the Wimmer nugget. This is the nugget that belonged to Jenny and Peter Wimmer, and that was sold about 3 times before it arrived in the Bancroft Library in about 1927 or 1928.
And this is the nugget that she wore around her neck?
Right, in a little leather pouch.
But now, was this the first piece of gold found in California up here at Sutter's Mill?
There's where the controversy comes in.
I knew there was going to be a controversy.
Because there is my understanding is that the piece of gold that was first discovered was half the size of a pea.
And this is bigger than a pea.
This is bigger than a pea. Now, there is a piece in the Smithsonian Institution which the Smithsonian claims is the original first gold nugget. But I'm quite convinced that this is the nugget that Mrs. Wimmer boiled in the lye and that
now,
she had.
Come over here, Mrs. Wimmer. You can tell. You remember what it looked like. You think that's it?
Well, it looks like it could have a little lye even left on it. Maybe that's quartz mixed in. But yeah, it looks like the piece I wore around my neck and had in the lye pot.
Really?
Sure
now,
does.
is this out for public display at the Bancroft?
Yes, it is.
And how is it identified in the case at the Bancroft?
Well, we have a scrapbook with the original affidavits from Jenny and Peter Wimmer that swear that this is the original gold nugget that James Marshall gave to Mrs. Wimmer in 1848.
And what do you think?
I'm convinced that it is.
Wow. Yeah. And you're convinced?
Yes, I know it's true.
And what about the Wimmer family? Are you convinced this is it?
That's it.
That's it. Too bad there wasn't more of that gold to spread around to the Wimmer family. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. You're one of the descendants. You can hold this thing. Watch out. Security is watching every move you make.
Don't worry, Kelsey.
This is very interesting because what we have done in our living history quest here today is to reunite the Wimmer family with Coloma, with Sutter's Mill, with the original piece of gold that really probably hasn't been here in Coloma in 150 years.
That's right.
Since you first found it.
Well,
so maybe you should hold it.
I found it in the soap. I boiled it
Well,
in
James,
the soap.
you come over here too.
James picked it up. Does that look like the one you picked up?
Well, I picked up a few pebbles. It could be one of them.
Yeah.
Well, don't put doubt on it now.
Well,
We've gone too far.
Like I say, the first piece is about half the size of a pea, but we brought some other pebbles on account of my hat. You know, it very likely was the very first one.
The point is, the gold, the first piece of gold, or certainly one of the first pieces of gold found up here in what is now known as Gold Country, has come home. It's back with the Wimmer family where it belongs. Now there is one of those obscure bits of California's gold history, and Tony, it's so obscure that you'd never even heard of the Wimmer Nugget.
Nope, I'd never heard of it.
He's got every other nugget in the world right here, but the Wimmer Nugget kind of slipped through the cracks. Why did Tony not know about it? Is it because the Bancroft keeps all these things to themselves and doesn't share them very much, or what?
I think so, and I also think that it's probably more part of fable in one sense maybe than mineralogy, which Tony's an expert in. When Marshall discovered the gold, when the pieces were discovered, they spent about 24 hours looking at it, banging it. They tried to melt it in a shovel held over a hot mesquite fire. They took it back. Sutter himself treated it with nitric acid to look at it. And it was only until the cook, Mrs. Wimmer, took the nugget and boiled it, or so the story goes, boiled it in lye soap because she was boiling the clothes as they did in those days, that it looked clean and came out unstained, and they said, ah, yes, it's gold.
Tony, is that what usually happens when people find what looks like gold? Do they get worried that it's fool's gold? They don't want their hopes to get up too high? They want it tested right away?
Well, you know, everyone is different, and most of the people who bring in material to us have fool's gold, but they firmly believe it's real gold, and they don't want to hear otherwise.
Yeah. So that's probably what they were feeling at the
Yes.
same time.
I think so, and I think, you know, then Sam Brannan came up, and Sam Brannan decided it was gold after Mrs. Wimmer boiled it, and he went down to San Francisco, back to San Francisco, and announced that gold had been discovered. I also think the story, Huell puts, and Tony puts a woman at the center of the discovery of gold. So it's a nice, as a piece of historical fable, it's a nice piece of business. It brings a woman there. It humanizes the story.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. She probably did boil it in lye soap, along with the other tests that were made.
Well, you can't separate the story of gold in California from the human story. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. And let Mrs. Wimmer then stand for all those thousands and thousands of women whose lives would be transformed in the years to come by either having their husbands or their fiancés or their sons or brothers go out to the gold fields, or who themselves would come to the gold fields and work alongside their men. That the gold rush was feminine as well as masculine, and Mrs. Wimmer stands for that.
Well, we're saying goodbye. We want to invite people to come down to the Natural History Museum, because this exhibit is a permanent exhibit.
This is permanent.
So you can come down here and lust after all of this real gold that's down here. The school kids are coming in. You can hear them in the background.
Oh, yeah.
They like to probably get right up and press their noses up against the glass, don't they?
We have people who come and wipe nose prints off every hour or so.
Yeah, and adults probably put their noses up against the glass too. And Dr. Starr, you as well as anyone could have made us all aware that the story of gold in California is really much more than just the nugget itself. It's a way of looking at life.
It's the story of value, Huell, California value. And gold is the symbol and the fact that ordinary Americans in the 19th, 20th, and now 21st century feel and continue to feel that life can be better for them in a golden place called California.
So when they come to California today, they're still in many ways looking not just for the gold nugget, but they are looking for the promise, for the wonder, for the richness of California.
That's right, for a better way of life. And I think that California has to constantly orient itself towards that, and that's why the story of the gold rush is part of our enduring historical heritage.
Well, what a wonderful heritage it is, too, the heritage of California and its gold. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.